I there? I'm there. Hello, everybody. Guys, I couldn't have been set up better for this presentation. You literally ended on technology as an enabler, and people are the magic. And that is essentially where I'm going to go and take us further into that topic. So as Jen said, I'm the Group Technology Director for Creed Fragrances, which is a high-end luxury niche fragrance house. Previous to that, I was at Sweaty Betty, so I have a lot of experience in delivering technology projects and working across retail businesses. What I want to talk to you guys about today is really grounded, practical tips that we can all use to work together better. And you could probably hear it as themes throughout the day. Alex was talking about the importance of marketing and finance working together. I'm here obviously talking about marketing and technology, but there's a real piece and an interweaving thread about how important it is that businesses really pull together to make things happen. So I'm going to talk about this in the context of maybe a new IT project and looking at software solutions and what to expect from an IT project. Some of these principles will apply regardless of whether you're doing a project or not, but it's a nice framework for us to work through. So why do we need to partner together? Why is it so important? Well, this you guys may have seen, you may not have seen. I found it staggering, but essentially this is the marketing technology landscape, tool landscape that's out there. There are 14,000 tools on the market, and it grew by 28% from 2023 to 2024. Trying to choose new tooling is a daunting proposition, probably for you guys as marketeers, for technologists as well. How you would sort through this by yourself is insane, and probably there's an AI joke in there somewhere. But the point is, don't go it alone. It's really, really important when you're looking at new tools and when you're selecting new solutions that within marketing, you guys are playing your part, but you're also engaging other parts of the business, like finance, but certainly technology. And that technology marketing partnership is so important because everybody has their own strengths and their own skill sets that they're bringing to the table. So on the marketing side of things, you guys naturally are customer focused. You have a clear vision of the business growth drivers because you're close to it. You understand your strengths and opportunities from a marketing perspective, and you're really the guardian of that brand experience and the customer experience. IT is not doing that day to day. That's not our wheelhouse. What we are bringing to the table is a real level of cybersecurity, data privacy, being able to negotiate software as a service contracts. We do that day in and day out. You guys might not be. IT project management, all the other things about connecting your applications. If you say, oh, I really want this to link into all these other tools, IT is there to help. And then also how you plan for long-term support. So you can really see that all of these things are needed when you're looking at implementing something new. And each group has their own skills that they're bringing to the table, and they're quite complementary skills. No one's fighting for turf over cybersecurity in this scenario. So that's why it's important to work together. And the first thing you might be doing is selecting a new application. And within that 14,000, there's a lot to think about, and you think about where do you even start? Well, the first starting point is really with the brand. Don't start thinking about the tech without a very clear vision of what you're trying to achieve and where you're trying to go with it. So questions you might ask yourself, put either with the tech team or just within your own marketing team or yourself, is what are we trying to solve? When do we need to solve it by? What's working now? What's not working now that we want to change? How do we want to be spending our time? I think someone earlier was talking about the amount of time people are using doing data analysis, and actually all these AI tools that we're looking at can really speed that up. If we want to say, actually, we want our team not doing the data analysis and using tools, being able to paint that picture is really important. So asking these types of questions. What else is going on in the market that other people are doing that we need to keep pace with? It might not be that that's going to give us competitive advantage, but by not doing it, we're really falling behind. Being able to identify those things and articulate them is quite important. And then the last one is really thinking about how your brand identity and your priorities shape your needs. I think a great example that came up earlier, and it certainly applies to Creed as a luxury fragrance, is around loyalty and what loyalty does and does not look like for a luxury house. Right? A luxury house isn't going to be a point system, but it might be those special experiences that are happening at Victoria Beckham. So being able first to think about the brand, think about what's relevant, think about where you want to go, and then being able to articulate it and then engaging with your tech team so that they have that clear vision, and that you're not just starting with a list of 14,000 applications and trying to make heads or tails of them, because that's going to get you lost real quick. So I'm very much whizzing through any software selection process, but any time you go and select software, you should be having at least these key ingredients. And sometimes, particularly if you're trying to move at pace, it's easy to skip a few of these, which is why I thought it's important to touch on it. So that clear vision, and with that, a benefits case. And most of the time, that's coming from you guys. It's not coming from tech. Most of the time, it's you guys saying, this is what we need, this is why we need it, and this is how it's going to drive our strategy or our sales, and what we're trying to get out of it. It's also important to look at multiple options, because sometimes you learn along the way more about what you want when you look at different things and identify what you don't want. So it's important to look at several different things and have a standard scorecard that you're using to evaluate these vendors. What's worked very well in the past, and it's quite common, is to have it be a multifunctional scorecard. So you've got technical requirements, you might have marketing requirements, you might have e-com requirements. Everyone's feeding those in, everyone's scoring, and you might weight some things more than others, but it's a way to be data-driven about that decision-making and not just have a lot of people in a room kind of fighting it out. It also helps, depending on your business, it also helps to be able to show that you evaluated options and you had an unbiased approach to it when you're asking for funding for these things. It's also important, the third thing here is really around your compatibility of the solution. So it goes back to that tool that you've chosen. Does it work within the technical landscape that's out there? Does it play nice with the other tools, and your tech team can feed in on that? But also, is it giving you the functionality within the marketing team that you really need? And both of those are equally important. It's not just about, hey, it's the right tools, it can't connect to anything, but I don't care, tech, you figure it out, because ultimately, we won't win together unless you have those two in sync. And then another thing which sounds so obvious, but can sometimes really get missed, particularly when you're running after something quickly, is making sure that you've identified that you've got the budget, the timeline, and the people to deliver this and run it. I know that sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed the number of times that someone has a great idea and you're leapfrogging over a lot of these, and then you get halfway through trying to implement something and you realize that you've not set yourselves up for success. So all of this comes before you even get into a project. Depending on your business, you might have a few hurdles to jump through to get this signed off, or it might be happy days and you just run at it. But that's things to think about just to set yourselves up at a very minimum for success when you go into a new project. So I'm going to spend a little more time talking about IT projects. Probably every single one of you has been involved in them in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think I'll be telling you anything groundbreaking or brand new, but really good reminders and things that can help you orient yourself if you are getting caught up in change, or really approaching something new that you haven't done for a while. Or if you're working with a new IT team in a way that you haven't before, and actually you need to work with them to make sure you have common understanding of how to approach the different topics. So there's a big, big, big debate, which I'm not going to go through, but around different ways to deliver projects. You've probably heard Agile, you've probably heard Waterfall. Both of those have their time and place, and your organizations and you guys will have your own preferences. But regardless of whether you do Waterfall or Agile, the same elements come into play. So it's just the frequency at which you iterate on all of these. So there's always going to be some element of identifying requirements. That could be called use cases or user stories, but identifying what you need and planning for that. Then there's a design and development, which is usually more focused within technology, so less interaction there. And then testing and training and go live are all touch points again with marketing. In a waterfall scenario, all of it would be planned up front, and you'd have much longer phases with a big go-live at the end. In a more agile approach, you'd have short sprints, but you'd still be doing the same elements. That would just be a more compressed timeline. So what I want to do is talk about how to organize around each of those types of phases to be successful. And the areas to talk about are kind of how you would resource or approach these types of projects, what defining requirements, what to think about in those moments, considerations for your testing, and then a really big important one, which is change management and training, and it goes back to the point earlier around adoption, because success is really based on how much a tool is adopted and how empowered people feel to use it. So, there's a lot of text on this one, but essentially what we're saying here is any technology project team has different actors and typical players. You typically have executive sponsors who are looking after the delivery and making sure everything's on track for the strategic goals that are set. You would have your project team from the IT perspective, but most importantly, you would have people within your marketing team who are embedded either fully or partially into the project to champion your division and their needs. So it's really important, and it's called different things in different organizations, but I'm using the term champion. This is somebody who's working in the project team from your department. It's really important when you think about who would be selected, that you select well. That you need somebody who understands your business process. Their role is really about gathering requirements, whether they know it themselves and articulating it or getting it from others on your team, that they can document how things are working now and how it should be in the future, that they're able to make decisions and raise risks. So not somebody who's so junior that they wouldn't know what's right and what's wrong. So you want somebody who can have the right mindset around that. This person will also be part of that team. So they'll be doing the testing. They'll be doing the training. You need somebody who's able to flesh their skill set out enough to do those tasks and isn't so narrowly focused on their everyday business as usual tasks. And there's a personality part too. Somebody who's flexible, but also detail-oriented, solution-minded, process-driven. It takes a special sauce to help bring about change in a thoughtful way and a efficient way. And so your IT team is there on the technical side for the tool and the application, but your internal team needs to really help support around business process and making sure what you're trying to get to is being protected all along the way. And your champion is that entry point for all of it. Now, I've talked about resourcing. I want to talk about requirements. This is a very, very old consulting and IT joke. So excuse me for being a bit nerdy here. You may not have seen this one. This is definitely an IT joke. But essentially, this shows you the different things that can go wrong when you talk about requirements. So if you start on the left, this is how your customer explained it. And then the second one is how your project leader understood it. Your third one is how it got designed. And then closest to me is what the customer really needed. Right? So these are actually, I mean, it's an exaggeration, but you'd be amazed at the number of ways that this same sentence or the same idea can be misinterpreted by so many different people. And what you're always trying to do is get everybody on the same page with the tire swing. And one thing that's really important to breaking that down is to make sure that there is a common language and a common understanding about what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to go about doing that, and actually how people work now. So when you think about articulating requirements, because you know you want to get to that tire swing, you know that's where you want to go, there are different ways to do it. And to be honest, your tech team and the personalities there and how they like to work could dictate some of it. Like I said, some people really work on user stories. To explain to me a user story and tell me what this user person wants to do and how they want to get there. Or it could be a more traditional approach. If you're feeling overwhelmed by that or you're not quite sure, one of the best ways to start is thinking about your customer journeys. And mapping out your customer journeys, thinking about what's working well, what's not working well, and that you want to change, and how you'd ideally like to see it. And that provides a very good basis for the second point here, which is educating your tech team. You guys and your teams are living and breathing your day-to-day work. IT is not. There's a reason marketeers are marketeers and IT folks are IT folks. We might understand in principle what you're doing, but we won't know the details. We won't know everything about what's working and what's not. And the best solutions will come from a shared understanding and being able to talk that through. So starting with what you know, being able to explain what you know, and setting up that shared common terminology really, really helps. So letting people know, how does this work? What do you need? Working in simple terms and building together is quite nice. And then also really being clear on what's most important. There are so many things that you could do, and many, many times IT folks like to get carried away with what they can solve. You come with a list of 15 problems, and they're like, we want to solve them all. And they're like, and it's really important to say, I'd love for you to solve them all, but if you could only solve 5 of them, these are the most important ones to solve, right? And helping to get the right things prioritized in the right ways. So that's requirements. A bit on testing, because this can catch folks out, and you may have fallen into this before. So it's really clear that typically, in any kind of implementation, your technology teams are going to test based on what the requirements are. So I'm going to use a really simplistic example, but if you said the button had to be green, they're going to say, is the button green? Yep, done, right? Now, you might know why the button was supposed to be green. And you might know that it was supposed to be green because when they click on it, something else happens. And you wanted to check that. So it's not anybody's fault that technology is generally going to be very regimented to making sure the requirements are met. But it's only going to be the marketing team who really understands the why and how you're using those applications on a real day-to-day basis. So it's very important that the marketing team is equally involved in testing. It's usually called user acceptance testing, and that testing is based on business process. The part that catches a lot of people out is writing test scripts. The number of times that business teams have come to tech and been like, well, you told me I needed to write user acceptance test scripts, but I don't really know what that means. Can't you just write them for me? That's what doesn't really work. So sometimes you might not have the skill set, your team might not have ever done it before, and they need coaching and they need help. Totally fine. But it's very important that they don't hand everything over to IT to completely test, because that's giving away you and your team's involvement in making sure the solution is what you need it to be. And during that testing time, that's the time to find the problems, report them, and you might have a really long list, you might have a short list. Most of the time, you find things. And I put at the bottom here, be ready to compromise. Because it's usually during a testing phase when things are getting really close and down to the wire, and you're finding things that aren't working, and then you're finding things that aren't working exactly how you wanted it, but you could probably live with it. And sometimes in that crunch period, you have to be able to say, okay, if we get this now, we can live with this until later. And those are the trade-offs that everyone might need to make together, but work through together. Okay, so you've tested it. We're ready to kind of train everybody and get ready to go live. And this comes back to that user adoption I mentioned and really change management. So again, IT plays a role in this, absolutely. But it's most powerful, change management is most powerful when it comes from people embedded within your team. So thinking about your team's managers, your project champion, and having them put together something that really makes sense to help introduce this change, whether it's just a change in tool, or it's a change in tools and process, so really being able to think about what needs to be documented for everybody to understand what's changing and how it needs to work. Think about the best way for your team to learn. A great example, we recently did this massive IT project at Creed where we had to change everyone's email addresses. And we had 300 staff out in the field, so working in counters and boutiques across the UK and Ireland. And we had to get across the message that their emails were going to change and there were certain things they need to do by a certain date. And actually, what was really, really effective is IT linked into our education team, and we were a cameo and guest star in one of their regular learning sessions and meetings. So they had a monthly meeting, we joined it, and got the message out in a forum where people were used to receiving information, and with people who they were used to hearing that information from. So thinking about kind of that best way for everybody to come on that journey, and making it authentic to your team and your business. But also thinking about what it's going to look like in those first few days after everyone's trying to work in a new way. Who's there to answer the questions? How does everybody know who to go to? And then the last one is really, what can managers do, particularly if you're trying to change the way you work with a new tool? It's really important that you have scaffolding around that new process to monitor it and make sure that people aren't just reverting back to the old way of doing things or getting so frustrated that they just abandon the tools and kind of work in their own way. So this is also where team leads and managers are vital to the success of an implementation and the vital success of adoption. And it's not, and very often you hear stories where teams will go, oh, well, IT delivered it, but no one understood it, so I guess IT is going to have to run it for us. I mean, that's a little extreme, but it kind of does happen. And what we want to do is really make sure there's that shared ownership feeling and that feeling of empowerment for everyone. And then there's another piece that often gets overlooked, which is how this application is going to be supported going forward. A lot of times, particularly with marketing tools, you guys are in a really lovely sweet spot where it's a software as a solution, and you've got teams like Ometria who are doing the support for you, and you may or may not actually need to include your internal IT team. But making sure there's a clear responsibility and accountability of who needs to be doing what to make sure that software and that application is running as you need it to run is important to think about before you start using it in production, so that when something goes wrong or when there's a question, everyone knows how to route that appropriately instead of kind of freaking out and worrying about, what do we do? And then there's also a piece around application monitoring. If you're using a completely SaaS tool, that's usually covered. But if it's something that's being hosted by your internal team or there's integrations, it's important that you're aware of who's looking after all of that, and if you're seeing problems, you know who to go to. So those are things to really think about. I know it's a whistle-stop tour, and as I said, some of these are probably things you've either encountered or you are aware of, and it's just a good reminder. But I think the thing that really is fundamental to all of this, and it's a common thread throughout the day, is just that relationship building. It is so fundamental, and humans are the magic. It is so fundamental that we all work together to drive success. So if I leave you with 3 things today, it's marketing needs to lead the vision when it comes to new marketing tools. Thinking about what's appropriate for the brand, thinking about how you want to work, painting that picture so that tech can work with you to provide the best solutions. Strong collaborative relationships, that's at every level. Alex talked about those junior members within finance working within junior members of marketing. The same goes for tech. It's really important that at every level, you guys are thinking about how do you let people build relationships. And sometimes it's not about working on a project together. Sometimes it's about socializing together and getting to know each other, understanding where everyone's coming from. And then at the end, don't forget to play to each other's strengths. Everybody has a different perspective, a different skill set, and we're there to make it happen together. So there you go. Thank you, guys.